All right, I think we'll get started. Welcome to everyone to the first hybrid live briefing session that the Boston Women's Workforce Council has had in 2 years. And I'm Kim Borman, the executive director. And it's been amazing to meet all of you in person because I've only seen you on Zoom and you look a lot taller, most of you, than what I remember. As we get started today, I want to send a special thank you to all the 100% Talent Compact signers who are here virtually. A special thank you to the anchor signers who support us very generously. Arbella Insurance, Mass General Brigham, Mass Mutual, Putnam Investments, Red Hat Software, State Street, and Vertex. So we're here today to celebrate the winners of our third annual Innovative Initiative Awards. It was a really difficult choice this year. We had a lot of great applications, and we are so pleased to know that you all are trying new and creative ways to close gender and racial wage gaps at your workplaces. It's not easy, and so thank you for your ideas. In a minute, I'm going to hand the podium over to one of my distinguished co-chairs, Kathy Minahan, to give you some background on the awards and why we do them. As the first female president and CEO of the Boston Federal Reserve Bank, Kathy knows a thing or two about the importance of changing culture to advance women. I will then be back with Alexandra Valdez, Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Women's Advancement, to announce our winners. And when we call your name, please come up here to grab your award and then seat yourself at the panel for our discussion so that we can talk about your programs and answer questions. So have the surprise be the ultimate. You'll see that your place tags, you'll see them here, just turn them around when you sit down. And with that, I'm going to turn the program over to Kathy for a brief history lesson.
Thanks so much, Kim. Even to see Kim in person is a thrill. I mean, once or twice before this. Have you all gone through the experience of hiring somebody really, really important in your office, but never seeing them live until recently, perhaps? It's a very eye-opening experience, and you realize on the one hand how much you can tell about somebody when you're interviewing them, even on Zoom. On the other hand, you realize how much you miss getting to know them as a colleague and a friend. So I am just thrilled, as an extension of all of that, thrilled that all of you are here today in person. We have a good deal of video watchers on Zoom, which we also welcome to. But as we get back into meeting each other individually and in groups, I think that adds a lot to the kinds of things we want to talk about today, and that is what works. What works to change cultures? You don't change cultures on a Zoom call, I would argue. Now, I could be wrong about that. I think you do change cultures when you meet each other, you talk about the things that you want to advance, you talk about the problems, and you talk about the successes you've had or the successes you've learned about. That's what this program is all about, learning about success. Now, I've been involved with measuring the wage gaps, gender wage gaps, racial wage gaps here in Boston since 2013, when it started at the end of Mayor Menino's term, came to Mayor Walsh, and now to Mayor Wu. It's a relationship that we have with the Office of the Mayor that has, over that period of time, consistently been interested, if not totally and deeply involved in the work that's necessary to make a more equitable workplace, to make a greater sharing of wages. And I would argue if there's a greater sharing of wages, you start to eat into that wealth gap that is at the heart of so many problems here in Boston. So I really feel that the work we do at the Boston Women's Workforce Council, however detailed it might seem to you, how much ever you don't like filling out the forms and all of that, but when you come and you work with us and you learn from others about what's working there, we are taking steps forward to make things more equitable in our workforce. Clearly, when you have a wage gap, it's not measuring equal pay for equal work. What it's measuring is how many jobs at the upper end of the pay scale go to men versus jobs going to women, versus jobs going to people of color. Same issue. That's the kind of gap we want to close. We want to close because it's going to make all of our organizations function better. Again, that's what this Innovative Initiatives program is about. Making what we do work better for us, work better for our companies, making them more successful, profitable, equitable, all those things go together in my mind, and learning from others what successes they've had. So I can't thank you enough for being here. You're going to advance the work that we do in the Boston Women's Workforce Council, and we really appreciate the effort that all of you have put into the innovative initiatives that are going to be honored today. And I hope anybody who's here from companies that are not being honored, take a look. Think about it. Go home. If you've got questions, call us back at the Boston Women's Workforce Council. We'll do whatever we can to either answer your questions or put you in contact with the organization that won the award. And there can be some common sharing going on, which will help everyone. I could go on, but I know I'm getting the get out of there look from Kim, so.
Wonderful.
But thank you all for being here, and I'm really looking forward to the awards and the discussion.
All right, the moment you've been waiting for. We have 3 innovative initiative winners today. The first is actually joining us virtually from the UK. I don't know if she's there or not. C-Space, Increasing Pay and Progression, Equity and Representation. And accepting the award is Liz Bucknell. Yep.
We can see ourselves.
Is she there?
She was, I saw her name.
She's right here.
Okay.
There we go.
Liz, did you hear us? Did you hear us announce your name? Okay. All right. Well, we have an award waiting for you.
And we can hear her.
You have to set the audio on.
Audio on? Okay. All right.
She said something, like
I think just the next winner is actually in the audience. And Alex, you'll
Are we gonna, should we let her say a few or not?
later. at the
Okay,
next-
awesome. Well, so glad to see everyone. Such a pleasure to be here, represent the mayor's office. My name is Alexandra Valdez, the executive director of the Office of Women's Advancement. And the next award goes to MASCO, Equitable Policymaking. And accepting the award is a great friend, Sweeney, president and CEO. So a huge round of applause.
It's like when you graduate, right?
We have one more. Yeah, let's do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And our final award goes to Vertex Pharmaceuticals, Europe Biotechnology Curriculum. Accepting the award is Stacia Mcnaught, Vice President, Community Affairs. Congratulations to our 2022 award recipients. In addition to this year's winners, we have asked one of last year's winners, Dr. Miriam, Bredella, Vice Chair of the Department of Radiology at Mass General Hospital, as well as Director of Faculty Development for both the hospital and Harvard Medical School. Of course, she's very, very busy, and, and she's a woman, to participate in our discussion so that we can see how the initiative that she and her team won for last year has been implemented. So Dr. Bredella. And then our panel will be moderated by Katie Johnston, a Boston Globe reporter covering work and income inequality issues. And so thank you for joining us at this time. We will, a little housekeeping, we'll reserve about 10 minutes at the end of the panel for Q&A. And for virtual participants, please submit your questions through the chat whenever you want, and we'll make sure they're directed to the right participant. For in-person participants, raise your hand, and someone from our team will come by with a microphone and make sure that you get to ask your question. And lastly, I'd like everybody to know that the program is being recorded. Sound good?
All right, so I guess that's my cue. Hello, everyone. I'm Katie Johnston from the Globe. Thanks so much to the Women's Workforce Council for having me. Hello? Okay, just need to get closer. There we go. Thanks so much for having me. I'm always interested to learn about what companies are doing for their workers. I read about work and income inequality, so these kinds of issues are very near and dear to my heart, so I love getting a first-hand look and getting to grill the participants, although you guys don't really need to be grilled since you're winning awards. So anyway, I'm going to just go through and present each one of you, and then you guys can talk about your initiative for a couple minutes, and then we'll do some questions. So Liz, why don't we start with you? Liz Bucknall, the Vice President of Global People at the marketing firm C-Space. Liz has spent 9 years at C-Space working in people and HR roles in London, San Francisco, and Boston. And she oversees a very important component of the company, compensation for the US. So Liz, you want to take it away?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I just relocated back to London, but I have spent the last 2 years in Boston. I'm super appreciative to be recognized with the award. Pay equity is something that I'm sure we all know the importance of and value of in our organization. And is work that we've been doing with in-depth analysis for the last 2 years, both to understand where, if and where we have gaps, to make current constant corrections if needed to different levels, and also to understand race representation and gender representation at different levels. I think we'll all have an understanding of how that can be easier to achieve at lower levels and how we can attract and retain talent all the way to the top and to leadership. Pay equity doesn't just happen in a salary. It needs support across our systems and processes and at our leadership levels. And we have been fortunate to have support from all of those things to show that we don't have huge or any significant pay equity disparities, and have been able to use that to also track and promote progress and provide opportunities for different groups to increase diversity at leadership levels this year, with increased promotions to our VP level and to managing director and executive leadership team levels as well.
Great. So David, let's go to you next. You are the president and CEO of MASCO, which is a nonprofit organization that serves as the chief planner and principal steward of the Longwood medical area, providing critical services to the hospitals, colleges, and cultural institutions in the area.
Sure. Thank you, Katie. And thank you to the Boston Women's Workforce Council, Kim and Kathy, the Mayor's Office of Women's Advancement, Mayor Wu and Alex Valdez. We at MASCO are thrilled to be participating and to be honored today. As Katie mentioned, we're a small nonprofit who act as the stewards of the Longwood medical area on behalf of the major employers there. I came into the organization about 2 years ago, and it became pretty much immediately clear to me that at that moment in time, there was a tremendous opportunity to center diversity, equity, and inclusion in the middle of everything that we did in terms of our policy making and our procedures at MASCO. Kim and Kathy talked a lot in their introductions about it being a cultural issue, and I think that very much resonates with us. There's no silver bullet solution that's going to close all of the gender and racial wage gaps overnight. But a change in mentality within the organization, I think over time, bears a lot of fruit. So we have tried to ensure that there is an equity lens in everything that we do at MASCO. So that's manifested itself in a number of ways, starting with how we recruit and attract employees, making sure that we are posting in the right places, that our job descriptions and postings have realistic requirements that break down barriers that allow everyone an opportunity potentially to work at MASCO. It also manifests itself in our employee benefits and compensation practices. So we have permanently moved to a 2-day-a-week hybrid work from home hybrid work plan. We have on-site childcare. We provide generous commuting benefits such as MBTA passes and shuttles from satellite parking locations. We also have changed policies to ensure that our HR policies and procedures reflect what we want to be as an organization. So seemingly small things that I think add up. We've made Juneteenth a paid holiday that we celebrated for the first time yesterday. We have also tied all employee compensation in part to the accomplishment of our incentive goals as an organization. So we're all swimming in the same direction. We've hired compensation consultants to analyze our pay every 2 years to ensure that everybody is paid a market rate, and we have a process in place for making adjustments if that isn't in fact the case. So a number of initiatives that I think all add up to really a cultural shift and a new lens for seeing things at MASCO, and we're very thrilled to be here and to be a part of this, and to be up here with great partners like Vertex, C-Space, and Mass General.
Great. So next up we have Stacia Mcnaught. She has served as Vice President of External Affairs at Vertex Pharmaceutical for the past 14 years. And in this role, she works with corporate partners to address inequities in the local community. One of her major focuses is extending and diversifying the talent pipeline for the next generation of science leaders. Stacia?
Yeah, thanks, Katie, and thanks so much, Kathy. Oh, can you hear me okay? Okay. And thanks so much to Kathy and Kim, the Boston Women's Workforce Council, to Alex, Mayor Wu's office, and to the other panelists here today. Really happy to be receiving this award on behalf of Vertex, and really proud to be a core founding signer of the compact. The program that we're going to talk a little bit about today at Vertex is a partnership we created with Year Up about 3 years ago. And Year Up is a local nonprofit organization that was founded here in Boston, helping close the opportunity divide for young people ages 18 to 24 that haven't received a bachelor's degree. And so at Vertex, the biotech industry has been really booming, as I'm sure all of you have heard, and we're lucky here in Boston where the life sciences and biomedical industry is sort of the center of the universe. And that should be accessible to all folks and all residents of Boston. And so Vertex has been really committed to thinking about ways we can do that. So similar to what Dave mentioned, Reshma Kiwal-Ramani, who's our CEO, challenged our HR department to look at all of our job descriptions and really question whether the job experience qualifications and the credentials associated with those were really necessary. So in some cases, of course, we're going to need lawyers and physicians and things, but not all the case. And that led to a full 10% of our jobs do not require a bachelor's degree. And so we partnered with Year Up to help fill those jobs. That's 400 jobs at just Vertex. And so we worked in collaboration with Year Up to develop their first ever biotech curriculum. And the hope is really that this curriculum won't just be utilized by Vertex, but by other life sciences in the community here in Boston, Massachusetts, and beyond. We're really happy that our first cohort of 10 Year Up students, we had a 100% graduation rate through the program, and then 8 of those students are now full-time employees at Vertex, which is really exciting. And we're in the process of developing additional modular curriculum for other positions within Vertex, and are looking forward to starting our next group of Year Up students in September. So thanks so much for having me here and look forward to the discussion.
Great. And last but not least is the Dr. Miriam Bredella, here representing the 2020 winner, Massachusetts General Hospital. Dr. Bredella is a professor of radiology at Harvard Medical School, vice chair for faculty affairs in the Department of Radiology, and a musculoskeletal radiologist at Mass General. She also serves as director of the Center for Faculty Development at Mass General. And she was telling me right before we came out here that she loves each and every one of her many roles and would not want to give any of them up. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and it's such an honor to be here with these amazing panelists, and I love each of your initiatives, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. So thank you again, Boston Women's Workforce Council, Mayor Wu's office, Kathy, Kim, and everyone who was involved also in organizing this great event. So I'm really lucky that I actually got to come again in person, because our ceremony was virtual. So I just want to talk about an initiative we started at MGH to promote women, especially during COVID. So even before COVID, women are really underrepresented in academic medicine at higher academic ranks, but also in leadership positions. And one of the reasons for this is impediments to travel. So if you want to get promoted or advance, you have to give a lot of talks and be a visiting professor at a national or international institution. But if you have a family and kids at home, it's much harder to take a week off to travel. So when the COVID pandemic hit, that's when I just took over to be the director of the Center for Faculty Development. It was February 2020. Women were dropping out of the workforce, and we were thinking, what can we do to retain our women with initiatives that don't cost anything, because the hospital was in really, really financial constraints. So we started the Anne Klebansky Visiting Scholar Award, which gives women, faculty, and postdocs an opportunity to be a virtual visiting professor, because now all the lectures and visiting professorships are virtual. So we took the silver lining of the pandemic and thought now is the time to promote a lot of women and provide them the opportunity to be a visiting professor at a national or international institution, all organized by our center. And then the women are also, they get executive coaching and are involved in small group career coaching cohorts that meet about 6 to 8 times. And they talk about things like imposter syndrome, how to build a network. And it's really also to create community among the women at MGH, because it's such a big place. And then also they get a mentor at the institution that they're visiting virtually. So we started in 2020. I thought it would be a one-time thing, and then next year we're back to normal. Well, we did 2 cohorts so far. We have 68 women who are involved. And last week we selected our 3rd cohort. So we're still continuing with this. And I just have some stats here from our women. So we selected 68 women. They gave 211 lectures attended by more than 10,000 people. 42% were promoted, so academically, to the next rank. 53 received grants, 30% other awards, 94% published at least one manuscript. And what the most important thing, 65% were started in new leadership position. So, and then we also wanted to promote as many women as possible throughout the world. So we started a visiting lecture series. So invited a woman from the host institution that hosted one of our scholars to give a lecture at MGH, because it means a lot for the women to say, I spoke at Harvard, MGH, and we find our scholar and they talk on a topic that covers both of the areas. So they create another opportunities, and then these lectures are open to the community of the host person and the scholar that's visiting. So
that's great. That's excellent. Well, why don't we start with you and we'll work our way backwards. So I'm just so curious. I mean, I've written a little bit about this, like how remote work is really giving women opportunities, because so many of them do have more domestic duties than their partners do. It's just a fact, it seems like. And I wonder what kind of feedback you got from the women in the cohorts that you selected, as far as opportunities they were given and how that allowed them to do something they might not have been able to do.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that we are still struggling with. What should be the new normal be, or the next normal? So of course the women were very appreciative that they could give these lectures from the comfort of their living room, so to say, without having to travel. The group coaching was much easier because coordinating schedules and being on site, and we have so many different sites, so doing this virtually was much easier. Well, the executive coach doesn't even live in Boston. But we then also had one get-together in person last year, and I could really see how people longed the physical connection and being together in person again. So there is definitely, there are pros and cons to both, but the virtual meetings, also we have a lot of faculty meetings and staff meetings, and if you have to drop off your kids or you have to do stuff at home, and you're the only one who's calling in, you could always call in. You were not really involved, but now if everyone is virtual, then there is more equity, and so that was definitely a plus, but now going forward, people are starting to meetings are in person again, people are starting to come back together, but I think we have to make sure that we still leave this opportunity for people to be remote or do hybrid meetings and make sure that it's equitable, so even if half of the people are on Zoom, that they still get involved and talk, so.
And you're going to continue this initiative?
As long as meetings are still virtual, we will continue. So last week we selected our third cohort, so we're still going strong.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of interest, and I think there's a lot of interest because it is so easy. We make it very easy for the women to give the talks. And
Yeah.
I think that's what we need to do to retain people, just
Absolutely.
remove the barriers.
Well, Stacia, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the partnership with Europe and how you worked with them to develop the curriculum and how it worked. Do they take classes at Vertex, or it's just the curriculum you're helping them with? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks, Katie. With the curriculum, it was really a partnership. So first we looked inside the company in Vertex to take a look and say which areas of the business are right for this particular group of folks, and we settled on quality. So that's our quality assurance department as well as our pharmaceutical supply chain department. Then we got folks within those departments to volunteer to work with the Europe staff. They have professional curriculum writers on staff. They worked in partnership with our employees at Vertex to create the curriculum. We also partnered with, for example, Mass Bioed has an introductory course on what is biotech and utilized some of that as well. We also talked with other academic institutions. So the goal for these students through Year Up is to go through that program, get a job, but that's also not enough. We want a real career trajectory within Vertex or within the biotech sector in general. Perhaps they go on to additional schooling as well. So talked with folks, for example, at Northeastern, which has a really great program in quality, to make sure that it's sort of aligned and there are those stepping stones along the way. And then we had, when the students, they do 6 months of training with Year Up. They have teachers there who teach them. They get credits for them, community college credits. And we had guest speakers from Vertex come and speak with the students all along the way to give them context, to provide context as to what they're learning and how it's actually applied in the company.
That's great. And what you said, quality assurance, and what were the other job areas?
Pharmaceutical supply chain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for the current cohort. And then we're hoping, like I said, to create sort of a modular curriculum. So there are things when you're manufacturing, when you're making medicines, we're highly regulated by, by the FDA and folks. And so things like, general manufacturing practices, there are really specific skills that you need to have along the way. And you can put those skills in depending on what the job is. And so we're hoping to create sort of this set of modules that can be utilized depending on what the open positions are at the company.
Yeah, that's great. Well, David, I wonder if you could talk a little bit specific, some of the things that you have offered and how they contribute to improving diversity, equity, inclusion. A few things, you mentioned on-site childcare, 2 days working from home, even free parking. I wonder if just you could talk about some of those specifics and how they have helped you broaden your pipeline.
Sure. So I think as we discuss, it's really about a holistic look at what we're building in terms of attractiveness of a workplace. And I know we're here discussing this sort of through an equity lens, which was the sort of origin of our approach, but I think what we're finding is it's actually beneficial just to our overall attractiveness as a workplace, right? For men, women, people of color, and otherwise. I think that minority groups are disproportionately affected by some of the barriers that we're seeking to overcome, such as longer commutes, lack of access to childcare, ability to work from home, be around the family, but it's actually a benefit to everyone, and I think it's contributing to making for an exciting culture for everyone to work within. So we've had great success in hiring great people over the last couple of years. We're a relatively small organization relative to some of my peers up here. So in terms statistically, I think it'll take some time to play out. But what we're finding is we're getting a broad and diverse candidate pool when we hire. We've been pretty successful in retaining employees as well. And obviously this is during an era of extreme challenges in hiring. I mean, we're a member organization. I know we have one member who at any given time has 1,000 job openings. On the flip side of things, I had a position open a couple of months ago. We had 100 qualified candidates for that position. Wow. So I think we're beginning to see slowly the impact of all of these initiatives collectively, and it's really to the benefit of our entire organization, our entire workforce, and to the membership and the patients and residents that we serve.
And can you talk about some of the things you learned when you started tracking the diversity of your workforce and what you saw changing as you put these initiatives in place?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the act of just measuring how you're doing puts it front and center for managers. And it was interesting to me, I had come over from a different sector prior to the nonprofit sector, and I sort of took for granted, I think, that the overall diversity numbers would be a large part of the discussion as hiring decisions were made and as HR policies were developed. And I think to me that actually really promotes the value of events like this and awards like these, because there's still a long way to go, I think, in sort of spreading the idea that this should be the norm and that these are ideas that can be borrowed across organizations and the like. So I think it really just created, I mean, I'm sure to some managers, another step in another consideration that needed to be taken into account in hiring, but a relatively easy one to incorporate into the overall process, and ultimately to the end of creating better candidate pools for the organization by being more intentional about what we're looking for in employees and opening it up to the entire potential workforce and not just certain segments of it.
Right, yeah. Okay, Liz, I don't know where to look for you to see me. Should I look this way? I'm assuming you see me this way, but I can't see you. Is that right? Is it weird if I look that way? Okay.
Wherever you want.
All right. So I'd love you to talk a little bit more about what you did at C-Space. From what I understand, there were a lot of women senior executives, but not a lot of them were people of color. And this realization led to reevaluating access to promotions and salary increases for everyone, as I understand it. So I wonder if you could talk about that and how you went about that process.
Yeah, so we are very fortunate to have, well, depends which way you look at it, I suppose. I think we're very fortunate to have very strong women in our leadership roles. Our global CEO, Jessica DeVlieger, has been at the business and come up through the levels, and that has been the case for a number of our executive leadership and leadership at the levels below. So when we did our first in-depth analysis now a couple of years ago, it definitely showed that we had good representation at junior levels, but we weren't retaining that talent through the levels, and we weren't seeing it as much at levels above. And I think it would be easy for us, and it was easy for us to say, oh, it's really clear about how you get promoted in the path and what you need to demonstrate. But what we were less in tune with what was accessible and easy through the lens of white corporate America versus the lens of other minority groups, and how we were going to provide opportunities in for those groups that created more diverse processes and opportunities and access. So over, as I said earlier, the the equity that you have across your systems and across your cultural and the formal and the informal ways that we all go about working definitely informed that, as well as having a greater lens on our diverse talent and who we wanted to make sure were both clear and understood, and we were adapting internally to provide and make sure that it was clear on the opportunities that were available and present them in terms that was accessible, knowing that all of us hold different cultural scripts depending on our backgrounds. There is definitely work to do, and I think, like some of the other panelists have said, it can be maybe easy for us being recognized in this way to feel really good, and we should feel good about the progress we've made. But for me, it feels like at the moment we might be above average, but it's still not where we need to be. So I think that's why a lot of the work that we are doing is ongoing. We'll continue to iterate. We'll continue to look across our business at how equity is created, and hopefully the communication piece back to the employees and our whole employee population, so they understand we're on this journey. And that was also a deliberate approach on our path, not to mark in sand like absolutes, but rather than to have it as an iterative process, which we're fortunate to have in the way we work overall as well, a kind of constant learning growth mindset. So we were set up for success in that side of things.
And I saw something in the literature about this, that you talk about talent planning to help BIPOC workers advance in their careers. And I wonder if you can describe what that is in more detail.
Yeah, so we're not a huge organization. I know if I look at Vertex, for example, this is easier for us to achieve. We have about 300 people in our Americas business. So it's ultimately taking a greater look at the past and the experiences that people have. I've headed it help work with our VP of Learning, with our leaders of the business, and it's built in through our ongoing review and progression process, so that we understand what skills people have, their career goals. And again, like has been shared, sometimes they'll be in the path that we would see as natural progression, but it might also be sideways moves. It might be that we've been fortunate to retain through the ranks across different diversities, the people from intern level, but to have grown up in one organization, how do we help them develop their experience to become more holistic, but having more agreed next steps, and critically for us, making sure that even if we know it as the people team or as the leads of the departments and reporting managers, does the individual person know, like how valued they are to the organization, what their next steps are, how do they access opportunities, so that ultimately, I'm sure everyone, like HR friends will know, so that everyone's on the same page, so that everyone has a really good understanding of where they are today and opportunities ahead of them. And it's just been something we look to do across our employee population, especially with high potential employees, and it's as well now with our minority group employees as well.
Great. Well, I wonder if I could just throw a question out to any of you who want to talk about it. Maybe what advice you might have for other organizations who are looking to embark on kind of eliminating any gender and racial wage gaps that they might have in their workforce. Like, what's a good starting point for that?
I can get started. I think first of all, get the data. And we talked a little bit in the break. Sometimes it's very hard to get the data. And in medicine, there are different compensation models. And we discussed that some is RVU based. It's men's relative value unit. So for each task, each patient you see, or each surgery you do, you get a certain RVU number. And then people might say, wow, this is really equitable because, I mean, shouldn't matter whether you're a man or a woman, but there are a lot of studies out there that have shown that women often see more complex patients that maybe talk longer, so you cannot see as many as a man, or they don't get the surgery that are really high yield. So even if you have some, just to summarize or broaden this for everyone, even if you have some measures which you think are equitable, just go the extra mile and really ask yourself, is it really equitable or not, and get really good data, because if you don't have the data, then it's very hard to do an analysis.
I think that's right. Get the data for sure as a first step. I think it's also really important to listen to your employees who are women, who are BIPOC individuals, and really hear their perspective of what they're going through. One of the things we've done at Vertex in that regard is for our Black and Brown employees, director level and above, we created mentoring circles with members of the executive committee. And so they meet regularly in small groups with a member of the executive committee, including the CEO. And it's been really great for those employees to be seen, feel heard, get career advice, network with each other, et cetera. And so I think just listening to your employees is one thing I would suggest.
I think that's such a great point, because I've seen some stories recently of especially people of color who prefer working from home just because of like the microaggressions that they experience at work that maybe don't surface anywhere in the data and isn't like a reportable offense, but just like the little things that just wear you down. You just want to, but if you're able to address those things and make them feel comfortable, everyone feel comfortable coming to the office, that's a huge difference. Is there anything you wanted to add, David or Liz, about the...
I just add quickly, I agree with what's been said thus far, but I think also it's critical to get buy-in from the leadership of the organization. I think these are issues that have been known for a long time, and I think that lip service has been paid to for a long time, but I think it's incumbent on leaders to ensure that their broader leadership teams feel like this is truly a priority and not just something that we talk about, and that there will be some discussion of this, not just the policy is released and then sort of goes into the ether, but that there will be accountability to how we're doing toward this, and it'll be a recurring issue that we report the data on, we make adjustments on, and that we will be show some courage in taking initiatives around and taking some chances with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would just add to what's been said, and especially around that leadership point. You need to have a leadership team, and I would say particularly CEO, who truly believe that this is critical to the organization, not just in the press releases or the all-staff emails, but also in how they show up day to day, and potentially be prepared to have tough conversations and have a culture where you can call stuff out. Everyone's coming to this journey from different places, and having a culture where people feel they can make mistakes but learn from and correct. I think one mistake is forgivable. The learning is the opportunity. But yeah, definitely to microaggressions, that should be something that we're all really working hard to eliminate, because I think it's very hard unless we've been in those positions to have any understanding. I would say, and maybe this is me personally, to have understanding of what that must feel like in a day-to-day environment, especially one that is espousing safety for its majority.
Great. Now, I think we want to take some time for audience questions or virtual audience questions. So does anyone want to ask our esteemed panel anything?
Virtually, from Whitney Mooney. For all panelists, how do you recommend organization with limited fund work toward these amazing initiatives, but how do you prioritize as well? Any panelists can take this.
Well, our initiative didn't cost anything. It was for free. So sponsorship and having, if your organization feels that this is their duty, that is their job, that's good for everyone, you can do a lot that really doesn't cost that much. But of course, childcare, that's a huge issue for us. So I would love to talk to you about how to organize it. Or these are, of course, things that are much more costly, but I think you can, even with mentorship and sponsorship, promote women, and there you can achieve a lot.
We didn't have lots of spare funds to put towards this, but what we did as a people team was understand everything on our plates day to day, the stuff that has to get done, like payroll, for example, and those things that just have to happen. And then the initiatives that we felt passionately about, and weighing up, doing an initial prioritization, and then creating that leadership from getting that buy-in from leadership about what trade-offs might have to be made and what we advocated focusing on, and what else may come later in the year or years down the line. In terms of benefits, we do a quarterly review of where we're investing. We do, again, would love to hear more about the some of the big ads that David and his team have made, but definitely on a smaller scale, just weighing up what might be valuable to employees and where we're investing so that we can make changes if needed.
Great panel. Thank you so much. We've been struggling ever since the beginning of doing the work of the Boston Women's Workforce Council on the right metrics to think about. And of course, we have a standard metric, a very, very confidential survey that we do every couple of years that actually measures real wage gaps, gender wage gaps, racial wage gaps. I'm wondering what metrics you are turning to give you some confidence that, aside from making people feel good, these initiatives are actually working. And I'm also wondering whether you've actually taken the step, which for a lot of organizations is a big step, of actually measuring your wage gaps the way that it is done both nationally and here in Boston, i.e. the aggregate of white men's salaries versus the aggregate of white women's, people of color, and so forth, independent of where those salaries are earned, which gives you a measure of what groups are getting paid well in an organization and what aren't. And it takes a long time to change those, but it's good to have some place to start. So I'm wondering if you've started there.
Yeah, I think there are a number of good metrics that are out there that have been promoted by organizations like the Boston Women's Workforce Council, for instance, that are useful in organizations. So I like to look at things like the composition of our leaders, the gender and racial composition of our leadership team, which I'm proud to say contains half women on executive staff as well as people of color. We don't measure our gap explicitly with the exact same formula that you use it, but we do have systems in place that measure the salaries of all employees that are market-based based on a consulting firm that we use that put some guardrails on that hopefully ensure fair compensation as well. I think we also look at obviously the overall demographics of the organization, as well as overall pay and how we compare to the marketplace. So I think, again, it's a complicated issue, as everyone knows, and I think there are a number of different measures that can be used to measure yourself against how you're doing and where you want to go.
Yeah, I agree. I think it starts from the very top. So looking at our board composition, that's been really important to Vertex over time. Who is on our board of directors, looking at the leadership. Really proud at Vertex that our CEO currently, Reshma Kiwal-Ramani, is the first woman of color to head a major biotech firm in the US. So that's been wonderful. And it's really, I'll tell you a personal story. When she became CEO, I have three children myself, 2 daughters, and my oldest daughter was 9 at the time. And she hears me talking about our CEO, and our former CEO was a white man named Jeff. And I had said something over dinner of, and the new CEO, and my daughter stopped me and she said, well, what happened to Jeff? And that was the first question. And then she said, she's a woman like this. And, I have worked every day of my daughter's life, and to still see that reaction from her was really, impactful to me. And, Reshma really recognizes, and I think, sees in herself what a model she is, both to women, but also to people of color, and particularly to women of color. And it's been at the forefront of her mind. I think adding on to looking at the data, I think within organizations that are large, like Vertex, like Mass General, et cetera, it's really looking within departments and groups as well to say what is the makeup, what is going on within each of these groups, looking at promotion rate, looking at how long employees stay with the company, et cetera, and some of those other factors in addition to of course the wage data.
Yeah, well, I'm so impressed by what you're doing. Harvard Medical School, MGH, unfortunately, is predominantly white males in leadership position at the medical school, but also at the high academic ranks. As I said, less than 1/4 of full professors are women. At MGH, I think 90% of department chairs are male. And what we are trying with this initiative, our metrics are, okay, how many women are getting promoted now to higher ranks? How many are getting leadership position? And things are changing slowly. We're also trying to work with the medical school to change the promotion criteria because they're very biased toward a certain phenotype, I call it, people who do grants and write papers. But women do a lot of mentoring, they do a lot of committee services, and this is just not recognized. Also, the medical school always says, yeah, we recognize everything, but you cannot get promoted if you don't have the papers or the grants. So we're trying to slowly change that. And for the equity, I was asked in my department to look at pay equity, and I developed a model for researchers how you determine what would be a fair pay, because they're all self-supported by grants from the NIH or others. So I know in my department we're doing really well. Women actually make a little bit more than men, but at the hospital level or the whole medical school, I have no ideas, and people are very secretive. So I really applaud the companies here that are very open and get consultants in and look at pay equity.
I can add, lastly, we have looked at pay equity on the traditional comparison of all genders and all races, of everyone doing different jobs. And we've done it in a more focused way of people in the same role. I can see the value in both, and it's interesting being back in the UK where if you're a company of over 250, you need to report legally on pay equity. So when I was signing up for my new utilities provider, I could access on their, like by their FAQ, their pay, their gender pay report, and racial pay equity is coming, or is a newer statistic that's been requested. I think also as we look towards the states in the US where pay transparency is already a legal consideration in Colorado, or is coming in New York, for those of us that have employees there, like doing the work now on this sort of things is gonna be an important part of the kind of employee fairness and value proposition, and set that up as salaries do become more transparent inside and outside of our organizations.
So I want to thank this panel, which has been really enlightening. Thank you so much for your participation. And I don't think it's too late in the UK, Liz, but we do appreciate you being here. In our closing, which will be quick, I want to first introduce Evelyn Murphy, our other illustrious co-chair, who is up there, at least for me. She's going to speak to the results of the brief survey that we sent out of what innovative initiatives people are actually using. And as we all know, Evelyn, as the first woman to win statewide office in Massachusetts as lieutenant governor, has been advocating for women's advancements for years. We owe her a large debt of gratitude. So please let me turn it over to Evelyn, who has something
Thanks,
to say.
Kim. Well, let me tell you, as I'm listening to this, I am stunned by the difference between this dialogue and what is typically part of these discussions about DE&I and the panels and everything. And what I conclude out of it is, we've spent the last 8 years with the council building trust with all of you signers. And we've done it in a way that started with providing your gender and racial wage gap data anonymously to us. And for 8 years, nothing has leaked. It is a very important, we're the only game in the country, whether it's city, town, state, or even nationally, in which employers provide this kind of data. And we've been able to do it because we've honored this confidentiality. What that has done is given us the freedom now to have these kinds of discussions because we built the trust among us that we can have a very candid, thoughtful discussion about what's working and what's not working. I don't find this in other forums. And I don't find it largely because in other presenters, they're either presenting because they want the business or their company wants the business. There's some kind of underlying sales pitch going on. That's a crass way of putting it. But nonetheless, those are discussions in which they're simple. They're sort of top line. Instead, what you're talking about here is the complexity, the reality of what Kathy started with, of saying, how do we change the culture? The theme has been picked up over and over again, and we all know that we do that in a lot of details, attending to those details with meticulous care and attention, and that's what will get us where we need to go. So I have to say thank you to the panelists, but to all our signers for having the trust that we will again not misuse this kind of information, but in fact use it in order not just to advance any single signer, but advance all of us together. So that in fact, every other year when we measure our wage gaps together, we start to show the kind of progress that leads the way. So to me, this is a very different discussion, and it is based profoundly on trust. We did, as Kim mentioned, do a brief survey to see what kind of use has been made of the previous innovative winners and innovative initiative winners. And a couple things stood out to me about this. It's a small sample, so I'm not gonna pretend it's statistically valid or anything else, but I did want to pass on. We did the questions both for winners of the innovative initiatives pre-COVID and also those coming out of the COVID era. The two things that stood out pre-COVID are the large number of companies, signers for the compact, who've invested in programs to increase hiring, retention, and promotion of BIPOC employees, and also implemented internal tracking systems to provide accountability among leadership for increasing diversity at senior levels. You've picked up on those themes in this discussion here, but those are the things that stood out as other signers of the compact also following in your footsteps and along with you to have this kind of experience. In the COVID era, the two things that popped up as the most responsive as to what other signers are doing are allowing hybrid work and allowing flex schedules. So I think it was commented before that, post-COVID, we may not be going back to the old normal, but the new normal will, likely have this kind of hybrid work and flex schedules ingrained in some of the practices. That's where we are with the application, the adaptations or the adoptions of the previous innovative winners. I would say finally that we all value this compact and the kind of connections that we've made with the signers. The council, our staff, work very hard to honor this trust. We'll continue to honor it. But in the process, sharing very candidly and thoughtfully what's working and what's not working has been a tremendous value. And I am optimistic that as we start into this next round of measuring our progress, that we'll start to see some progress here on the overall wage gaps, gender and racial wage gaps going forward, because of the level of detail at which we're all taking this so seriously. So thank you very much for attending for this wonderful conversation. And Kim, back to you.
Thank you, Evelyn. And thanks everyone here for attending today. It's just been wonderful. We hope you can take a few ideas back to your workplaces and consider testing them, implementing them. We know that there is no, somebody said, a silver bullet for this. You have to keep trying. But we are here as the BWWC to give you the resources to keep trying. So thank you again. Have a wonderful day and have a wonderful summer.